Welcome to Rodney Veal's Inspired By, a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. Rodney Veal, our host for this podcast, is an independent choreographer, interdisciplinary artist, and all-around fan of all things arts and creativity, and he's excited to share another great conversation with you. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoy the show, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, so here we are, and in today's podcast, which I'm super excited about, I'm going to fanboy out a little bit. I have never met Joey Monda, but his reputation and his talent precede him. And Joey Monda is a manager in New York as well as a producer, correct?
That's correct. I deal with all of the business side of theater and how to make it a commercial enterprise.
And because he is from the Midwest, he would never lead with this. He is a 2-time Tony Award-winner producer of Hadestown and Strange Loop, and has put, I consider to be some of the most incredible productions on the Broadway stage that I could get to love from afar, as some really incredible things. And we'll dive into all of that. But everyone, this is Joey Monda. Hi, Joey. How are you?
Thanks, Rodney. It's great to be here. Very, very honored.
That's super cool. Okay, so I love the fact because I didn't mention earlier, but you're our Wright State alum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to do this early. Joe Deere and Stuart McDowell say hello because I see them on a regular basis. And here's why, because my partner and I are co-chairing the Wright State Arts Gala.
On behalf of everybody at Wright State, thank you for doing that. It's a great event and great service that you're doing. Thank you.
I totally appreciate it. I'm so honored, and we were a little gobsmacked. We're like, really, us? And so we're taking it to heart, and because we just believe it. I know what a scholarship will do. It could change a life. It could change our larger community with allowing this talent to blossom. So super cool that way. So they send their love, and so it's kind of a good way to get into the background. So my curiosity is, you grew up in Youngstown. How did you come to this place of wanting to be in musical theater? This is before producing. So what drove you to kind of head down that lane?
Well, when you kind of start connecting some of the dots, it actually makes really perfect sense for me. I was a hyperactive child. My parents did not know what outlet for my energy. I hated sports, did not respond well when they signed me up for soccer. And so out of nothing but desperation, we looked into putting me into theater. And through friends of the family, we hooked up with the Youngstown Playhouse, which was a community theater in Youngstown, Ohio. And I got cast in my first production at, 5 or 6 years old. And that just kind of lit the light. There was no turning it off after that. I made some tremendous friends, and the Playhouse family really took me in, and that really became the foundation for basically my entire childhood all the way up through school. And then I will also say that, both of my parents are very business-minded individuals. My mom is the former dean of the College of Business at Youngstown State University. My dad ran a healthcare complex in Ravenna, Ohio. And so I grew up always having to bridge this left and right brain, where my interest was very much in the arts and culture side of things, but my parents and my background and the family life that I was living was very business-minded and very type A and everything. And so I grew up always bridging these two sides of my brain. I also played the piano. And so it was that was one of my artistic outlets. And when I was at the Playhouse and doing other regional theater, I did everything. I stage managed, I music directed, I worked backstage, I did the lights. I had exposure to every single aspect of what makes a show happen. And so all of that in my rear view mirror, it's completely coincidental that I found myself doing what I do for a living and living in the world that I do, because it all is exactly back to when I was 5 years old playing Stuart Little at the Youngstown Playhouse.
I was going to ask you what the play was.
That was
Stuart Little.
It was Stuart Little. And so it all is very easily trackable back to that particular moment.
Oh, what was it like? Because I know for me, when I first saw Kale Baryshnikov dance, and that was when I saw him dance, I was like, okay, that's what I want. That's that. I think I could do this. So when you the light bulb went off, my eyes got big. Did that happen? Was there a light bulb moment in that process where you went, oh yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that there was a light bulb moment, because it was just a series of so many things where,
Okay.
when I did Stuart Little, I was connected with other elementary, middle, and high schoolers that were doing theater regularly at their schools and in their communities and everything. And then I watched the kids that were older than me go to college for musical
Okay.
theater. And so there was always this path that I watched others pursue, where they could go and make a life out of this and go and figure out how to do it as they left their small community in Youngstown. And so that was always the natural progression for me, so that there was never a moment where I was like, that's what I want to do. There was always just kind of this, that's the path I want to follow. And I saw lots of people doing it. And then, in hindsight, I went to Wright State for a musical theater performance major. I was an actor, and I, did voice lessons and dance classes and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And since I moved to New York, I've not done anything on the performing side of things, because in hindsight, while I grew up thinking that I wanted to be on Broadway, what I realize now is that I actually just really wanted to work on Broadway. And so
Oh,
I,
okay.
this idea that what I get to do now is I'm involved in, like I said, all of the different aspects of what make a show, and all of the different people and jobs that go into that. And so it's never really been like that. If I had to track it back to a specific moment, it's always just kind of been a natural growth out of the next thing and into the next thing, where I can just continue to build on a very great foundation that places like Wright State and the Youngstown Playhouse have provided me.
Oh, that's so awesome. And I love the fact, well, because, we're both native Ohioans, and, it's like, there's something about Ohio and the arts, and I love the fact that it's a natural progression, and you talk about it, and there's not one light bulb. So you're on the pathway. I mean, I don't know. It seems to me your parents are very understanding of the fact that you wanted to pursue this pathway in the arts. I mean, my parents were pretty receptive to it as well. It's kind
Well,
of
I'm
unusual.
fortunate. Yeah, I'm fortunate that they never resisted it. I think that, my parents both saw that I was a really smart and very resourceful person. And so the idea that I was always going to figure out a way to land on my feet, I think they saw that sort of just natural tendency that they had, instilled in me and everything. And so I can't speak for them and say that they were always totally comfortable with it, or that they had blind faith that I was going to make something of myself.
One of these, a lot of this.
But
Fingers
but
crossed. Yeah.
it was definitely trust, and it was definitely, I think they saw what a lot of other people in Dayton and other people that have supported me growing up and throughout my life, is that, there was just such an unabashed passion and enthusiasm for what this world was, and how I was able to make one opportunity lead into another and lead into another. And so there was a constant sort of always forward momentum that I was able to build on.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Wright State then, because that seems to play a real pivotal connection, like, a role on the pathway. I mean,
Yeah, it was
talk about Wright
huge.
State, because Jonathan McNeil, who I interviewed who's doing such fantastic work at the Neon Movies in Dayton, he was in the film department. So he talked about Wright State from the perspective of the film department. Talk about Wright State's theater department. Why is it so special that we have a college that's really dedicated to the proposition of musical theater as a career track and a pathway?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that makes Wright State so wonderful and unique is the Midwestern values that you've kind of talked about. There was very much sort of a regimented training program that you went through, and then you graduated and you were typed and blah, 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 blah. Whereas Wright State, even from the moment that I did my college, the energy and the environment was very different than all of the other schools that I had visited. There was much more of a focus on individual artistry. There was a focus on personal growth, and there was a connection with the faculty to the students and the students to each other that I did not observe personally from any of the other schools that I visited. And, the ways that ended up benefiting me through my 4 years at school was that the program was very embracing of all of my many desires and my interests. So it wasn't just that while I was at school for a musical theater major that I had to do every production. They were very accommodating when I wanted to go work at the Human Race Theater Company, or when I wanted to go music direct at a community theater in Dayton, when I wanted to take time to go to New York and work in the industry. Wright State and the faculty were always incredibly accommodating and supportive of all of those different interests that I was able to have, all while keeping me at the same standards and expectations of other students who did not have all of those many desires. And so I was still required to do the same auditions that everybody else in the program was, but I was also able to play in the pit at the Human Race when they did the Drowsy Chaperone at the Victoria. Or, there was just always, I was able to be a production assistant on Caroline or Change. There was an embracing and an opportunity for me to go and explore all of these different facets of theater that I don't think I would have received the same level of support and encouragement from any other institution. And the thing that also makes Wright State so remarkable, and actually makes Dayton really special, is that there is a really proportionately outsized arts community for a city that is the size of Dayton, Ohio.
Wright State was a hugely pivotal part of my personal artistic journey and my professional. One of the things that I think makes Wright State so unique beyond other colleges that also have conservatory style programs is that there's a huge amount of focus and prioritizing of a student's individual artistry, which I did not experience from any of the other schools that I was visiting when I was doing the college audition circuit. There was an immediate sense and atmosphere that Wright State was focusing on each individual student, how to train them and how to make them the best artists that they can be, rather than necessarily directly trying to pigeonhole them into what the quote industry was going to expect of them or need them to be. And so that sort of individuality and focus on me individually that I really benefited from at Wright State was that also meant that the faculty and the program was super encouraging and supportive of me and my many different theatrical interests. And so when I told them that I wanted to go work at the Human Race and play in one of the pits and the musician pit, they were supportive of that. And they gave me the opportunity and they worked with me on a schedule that I was able to do that. The same thing when I said that I wanted to go music direct at a community theater, they were able to support me and provide me with that sort of opportunity, in addition to also having a student run theater on campus that I ran for 3 of the 4 years that I was at school. So at Wright State, I was getting experience in singing, acting, dancing, which is what my degree is in, but I was also getting experience in producing, in directing, in build design, in music directing. I was able to do all of those different facets and explore all of those different facets, all while still being a musical theater major and having a faculty that was really supportive of me exploring all of those different areas. And so I'm incredibly grateful for Wright State.
I love it because that was the question I asked Stuart. I said, well, how does one go down the pathway of becoming a producer? And he goes, well, Joey was producing a lot of student run theater in our black box for 3 of the 4 years. And I said, oh, that explains it. I'm like, because it does take that left and right brain sort of from your childhood to kind of be able to do navigate both worlds. Yeah.
And so within that, I was also able to navigate kind of the difficulties of politicking with my fellow students, of politicking with the faculty members, because, all of that and making sure that everybody understood all of the different facets that it takes to put on a show and everything. And so, yeah, that is sort of opportunity. And again, it's not just the saying, here it is. It was the encouragement that was really unique, that I think makes Wright State really above and beyond. And I think it's also really remarkable that in the last, 5 years, Wright State has had 2 Oscar winners, me having won multiple Tony Awards. Like there's a tremendous amount of success that has come out of a really small commuter campus public university. And I think that's a real testament to the artistic community and home that Wright State fosters, and the really important place that it sits within a larger arts landscape in the Dayton region.
I love it. And it's so true. And I get to partake of it every day since we're here in Dayton. And it's just like, how? It's just lovely. I just love the fact that I could make a living and a career here in Dayton, Ohio in the arts. I mean, did you go to New York going, I want to go on the producing side, or did you go thinking you were going to maybe do the performing side? How did that transition? I mean, how did that happen? Like you get, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily came to New York with a really specific idea of this is what I wanted to do. In fact, I know I didn't. So, one of the things that I did during college while at Wright State, the summer between my sophomore and my junior year, I got a job interning and being the assistant for Seth Rudetsky, who is a Broadway personality and music director. Seth is, just everybody on Broadway knows Seth. He's been in the business forever. He's not only just known, but beloved by so many people. And so working for and with him was really actually kind of the catalyst for a lot of things. So I worked for him the summer between my sophomore and junior year at Wright State. But I always kept in touch with him. And then when I moved to New York, I actually had an internship working for a Tony Award-winning producer who was working on this big Broadway-bound musical called Kinky Boots. And she, in addition to having this producing office, also had a general management office, a theatrical management office. And so for those of your listeners who don't know, which many of even the people in the business don't really know, a general manager in theater is really the chief of staff for a politician.
Okay. Right.
The politician has the ideas, the producer has all of the ideas and what they want the show to be, how they want to do it. And it's really the general manager's job to go and execute it. And so the general manager is responsible for the budgeting and the contracts and the finances and all of that. And so this producer had a general management office as well. And that was my first experience within the business side of show business, and really seeing how do you put together a financial model? How do you put together a business plan? How do you work with advertising agencies and all of this that goes into not just the art that we're creating, but how to make sure that there's an audience to see it. And so that was really the moment that opened my eyes to all of the different facets of this business. And that just kind of, again, I was fortunate and lucky to be able to turn an opportunity into another opportunity into another opportunity. And that's really how it all has spun out.
I love it. Yeah, just a little show called Kinky Boots. I mean, it's no,
It was a little, skit.
Little skit that some people might enjoy it. It's a great show. And so you get this, what I gather from the fact is that you really just enjoyed this back behind the scenes world. This was because it really isn't behind the scenes. You're in the world. It's not.
It's the intersection of all of my interests. It's, it's like I fell in love with the shows with musicals and plays when I was doing community theater and at Wright State. I fell in love with it. And now I'm seeing all of the different facets of what that original production, what it took to make that original production. And it's all of my different interests of how do you find something that is artistically really compelling and exciting, but then figuring out the financial model on how to make money off of it. And how does that, create a business that supports employees and supports an entire landscape and ecosystem in itself, and to do that. And so it's like that sort of opened my eyes into all of it's the perfect intersection of all of my interests and all of my passions.
I absolutely love it. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. This is the part in the podcast that happens. But when we come back, I'm going to ask more questions of Joey, and we're going to go into the Tony Award landscape, which is very fascinating to me.
Great.
We'll be back, folks.
I'm Ann Rotolanti, a member of the Inspired by team and the series producer of The Art Show. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd love to tell you about The Art Show, also hosted by Rodney Veal. Each week, Rodney profiles the worlds of art, music, dance, and theater in and around Southwest Ohio, along with cultural highlights from across the nation. Stream it now on the official Art Show YouTube channel or on the PBS app. Thanks, and now back to the show.
Okay, Joey. So all of this preparation. I mean, you're working on the little show Kinky Boots, that little primer for folks, the little skit. But all that experience has kind of led you to one experience after the next experience. So how did the experience of going into from the general manager side to, like you said, the producing side, where you have a vision, you see the material. What did you read the script for Hadestown, or how does that work as a producer to decide this is worth investing in, not only just money, but time and energy and the whole.
There's many different paths that a show can take to get to a commercial production and eventually Broadway. Most of them, right now at least, tend to have a not-for-profit or an off-Broadway production. And so Hadestown, I saw the show when it was originally at New York Theater Workshop off-Broadway. And prior to Hadestown being off-Broadway, I had also been in the producing office and was one of the lead producers on the musical Elite, starring George Takei. And one of our co-producers I knew was already working on Hadestown at the time. And so after I saw Hadestown off Broadway, my producing partner and I both loved it so much that we immediately called this colleague of ours and said, we have to be a part of this as you keep moving it forward. And so that was really, that was really the start for that particular production. And that's still a very large part of my job, which is, how great is that a huge part of my job is going and seeing shows around the world.
Right. Exactly. Come on.
And so that's probably one of the easiest ways I would say that I go and I see tons of stuff. I see tons of off-Broadway shows. I go to London frequently. I see tons of theater to try to figure out and see what I think is going to work on Broadway, both artistically and financially, and figuring that out.
Which is really important. I think a lot of people don't recognize you can make an artistic product and you can also make money at it, which I always try to tell parents of students, you can do both.
They're not exclusive. And ultimately we need Hadestown is a perfect example of something that's artistically really special and really unique. But financially also it's a small musical. It doesn't have a lot of actors in it. It doesn't cost a lot of money to run and operate. And so the intersection of those two things is really exciting to me. And that's a regular drive for me as a producer, is what are these things that are not just, big, empty, hollow shows, but things that actually, and that's not to say that I don't love, big fun musicals, because that's what I originally fell in love with. Bye Bye Birdie is one of my favorites. I love these big fun song and dance pieces, but how do they fit into the world? Is there a political motivation to them? Is there a social justice element of it? Like, what is those intersections? Hairspray is a perfect example of that too. Hairspray is a big fun musical that has social justice at the heart of it and everything. And so that's the type of work that I'm so fortunate that I get to spend every day, all day doing.
Oh, that is such a cool thing. And so, I mean, the fact that you knew Hadestown was like special, you knew, for our listeners, is like, if something really strikes an artist, I mean, I was speaking for myself, I won't speak for you, but you spoke for yourself so eloquently. You just get excited. It's like you just feel like this electricity to your body, and you're like, you have to tell everybody. You're like, you got to go see this play, or you need to see this dance production, and this is primo, right?
We all consume media. It's the same thing as you see a TV show and you're just like, that was really surprising to me. That movie really got me in a way that I didn't expect to do it. And, obviously being in this business and seeing as much stuff as I do, my tolerance is very different than somebody who might just see 2 Broadway shows a year. And so when something like that really speaks to me, I know that it's elevated and I know it's doing something special in that way.
Wow, that's such a cool thing. So Hadestown takes you to the gold. It takes you to the stage. How did that feel? Like you knew the spark was there, and then the show wins, best musical. I mean,
it's thrilling. I'm just a very tiny piece of a much larger machine. But that's the thing, is it takes so many of these different people to make a show a success, and to see not just the production as a whole, which the production is so special, to see the production get nominated and recognized in that way, but also to see so many of our principal actors. Patrick Page had been in this business for so long. Andre had been in this business for so long.
Yes.
And see these people get recognized at that time and everything, it again just speaks to the uniqueness of the moment and the power of what we're all doing each 8 times a week at the theater.
I love it. I love it. Your production company also produced Inheritance and a slave play. And I'm really intrigued by a slave play because that came up in conversation at our board meeting at Dayton Live. And I said, I think we could do it. They said, is a Dayton audience ready? I said, we'll make them ready. I mean, because I'm intrigued by the premise of that play. That's daring stuff. I mean, Jeremy Harris is doing some
but that's the type of theater that I get really interested and excited by. And, again, Slave Play started at New York Theater Workshop. That was its first off-Broadway. That was the off-Broadway production. And that one, there was something very clearly special about it, because of the experience that you had in the theater. But nobody left that theater ambivalent about what they just saw. Everybody had a super strong opinion about what that experience was. Some people absolutely loved it and had, a truly world-shaking experience.
Yeah, mind-blowing.
And other people loathed it and thought it was divisive and awful and offensive and traumatic and all of those things. There was nobody that just left and went, okay.
What's for dinner?
Yeah,
no, that's right.
And that's what theater should do to us. That's what I want theater, and that's the type of theater I want to see. So therefore, that's the type of theater that I want to put out into the world, is theater that you may not like it, but it creates conversation and it has a place and it's exciting and interesting and new. And The Inheritance was a similar way where, nobody left that theater at the end of part one, because it was a two-part play.
Right, exactly.
Nobody left that theater feeling empty, or it elicited such a strong emotional reaction from its audience, myself included, that it very clearly was something special was there. We have to look at this and how do we find a commercial path forward? Now, unfortunately, both of those shows, wild artistic successes, we did not find the intersection and hit the zeitgeist in the right way to make them the commercial successes. And so that continues to kind of be my Moby Dick of how do we keep finding these shows and this art, movies, television, theater, podcasts, whatever it is, that are exciting and artistically inspiring, but also how do we create a path forward for them so that they create finances and commercial success around them?
Well, and that's why I was so curious to talk to you, because you're kind of in essence, and I hate the phrase gatekeeper because that's not what you are. But you are in a sense, but just if we step back from any negative connotation of it, just you're in the epicenter of art and culture in the country, and I would say even indeed the world, and plus London too. We'll add London to the world stage, and so it's just got to be this kind of interesting place to be where you're seeing all of this work and you're seeing all this stuff. And I love how you said television, because I know that, and film, because I know a couple of productions you've produced to be shown in movie theaters, and that seems to have been wildly successful. So,
well, I will tie that somewhat into your comment about gatekeeper, which I think the word is accurate, negative connotation or not. It is true that I have privilege and that I have a deciding factor in what sort of work gets produced on the largest stage in the country and in the world. So there is a responsibility and there is a gatekeeper nature of that. And I don't shirk away from that. That doesn't scare me to say that, because yes, I want to talk about how we break down that gatekeeper mentality and how do we democratize. But, the idea that Broadway, for me, as you can tell, I am so unabashedly passionate about it. I fell in love with Broadway being a kid in Youngstown, Ohio. And the way that I fell in love with these musicals and this art form was through recordings, cast albums, and video recordings. It was Donny Osmond and Joseph. It was Kathy Rigby and Mary Martin and Peter Pan. It was the original Broadway cast recording of Bye Bye Birdie. all of those things, because I did not have regular access to go see Broadway musicals on a Broadway scale. All of those things contributed to my passion and my desire to be in this business. And so one of the things that I continue to feel very strongly about is, how do we expand Broadway as a brand in our Broadway shows and our stories beyond the four walls of these theaters in New York? Because the majority of people who want to see your show are either economically prohibited from doing so. They can't afford a ticket. They can't afford the cost to get to New York and all of the, domino effects that is, or they're geographically prohibited, which means they just aren't close enough that the show is never going to come to a theater near you or something like that. And so the idea of cinema distribution and cinema release for our Broadway productions is a really great way to break down both of those barriers and to really come up against them, because I can film my Broadway musical and put it in 700 movie theaters across the country for $18. And so all of a sudden, thousands of people who would never have otherwise had an opportunity to see the show now have an opportunity to do it. And more so, all of those people who would probably not have who probably would not have spent $100 on a ticket to see something that they didn't really know if they were going to enjoy it or not, but they'll spend $18 because that risk is less.
Right.
My belief is now all of those people who see the movie and fall in love with it are more likely to go spend $100 on a ticket when the show comes through their city on tour or something like that. It creates the sense of engagement and emotional attachment to a story that otherwise an audience member never would have had.
I love it. I mean, that's what we're dealing with now with Dayton Live, is trying to get its members to that place. And so, I mean, that's one of the conversations we're having with Dayton Live, because people have to have an emotional connection and response to something to kind of make that, like, to your point, like, I'm willing to invest $75, $80, $100.
Especially coming out of COVID now, where we have so much content and we don't even have to leave our couch. I can sit and have an emotionally fulfilling experience. I can have an amazing emotional experience just by sitting on my butt and investing in a new TV show or a new movie. And so we who are in the live performance sector have to figure out, how do we tell people that you should prioritize this live experience at the same time and money that we are asking you to do so. And that's really important. That's a really hard thing for us to do. And we have to figure out, but and us in theater, we need to be looking at all of these other industries that are similar, but different. So how do sports engage their audiences? How do concert acts engage their audiences? We were talking about this before we went on the air, but right now, coming out of COVID, certain businesses around the country are doing record-breaking business. Theater, concerts, touring are doing great business. And that's because people understand that it is worth their time and their money to have this experience in a room with 1,000 or 2,000 other people that they could not have in the isolation of their own home.
Right. Because we are social creatures by nature, human beings. We have to have that interaction. And there's something about laughing and crying and stillness with a group that feels so good. It's so satisfying. Totally. That I had forgotten that, and COVID took that away from me. I think actually we were on the stage at the Schuster Center renaming the organization the day the governor shut it down. Oh, so I was like, I could see the president of the board and the CEO. They're looking at me and we're rehearsing. I said, what do we do? I said, we're going to announce it. I was just new to the board. And I said, and then we're quietly going to walk away and figure it out. That was 3 years ago. So I, to your point, it's like figuring it out, that now we went through this journey of thinking that people wouldn't come back, but they are coming back and they're wanting it and they're hungry for it. It's just how to figure out, and especially, and this is important for those who are listening who are of art in their own right in other fields and disciplines. It has to be a consideration of the new landscape. And I know that you had an interview, you had an interview with Joe Deere, and you guys talked about that on stage. Do you kind of remember that conversation about, I think someone asked you the question about what's theater going to look, what is Broadway going to look like in the future because of the things that have occurred?
Oh no, I don't remember that because my answer vacillates on a daily basis on what it's going to look like.
You didn't think I was going to. You think I was going to go that deep, did you? I asked people, Joey. I really kind of like, okay,
I didn't realize this was Barbara Walters or Jonathan Swan interview. You really went deep into your background. No, I mean, I think, look, there are people who. Everybody can always catastrophize, right? And people have been fearing the end of whatever business or whatever media they're in for hundreds of years. The radio feared the television feared films. Like, I am certainly not in the catastrophic place where Broadway is going to cease to exist. But there are some major structural changes that theater has to undergo in order to enjoy longevity and in order to maximize its potential. And that's a real thing. And that's a real thing I think is there is a potential for catastrophe if we don't take it seriously enough. But we're in every business has generational tension where the next generation is frustrated by the gatekeepers and the old guard and feels that they have new and innovative initiatives that they want to implement, and the old guard is slow to take it up and is slow to adopt these new ideas and everything. And so that's not new. We're having that same that same conversation in theater. Film is having that same conversation. Mm-hmm. Everybody's having that conversation. But all of us that are involved in any sort of art or storytelling have to figure out, how do we talk to as wide of an audience as possible? How do we get our stories out to the people who are the most likely and the most desirous to get to hear them and receive them and are going to be the most moved by them? And that's a big thing that I'm sure you're talking about at Dayton Live, of how do we diversify our audience, not just racially, but also economically, gender-wise, people of different backgrounds. How do we instill kids that, this idea that going to the theater is important from a young age? All of those things and those problems, which are not new to our generation of producer, are huge. They are more important now than ever before because of how precarious what we're doing is, because it is expensive. It's increasingly expensive both to produce and to attend. And with so competitive content out there, there's so much competition for eyeballs. You want to talk about a free market economy, you have to figure out how are you going to incentivize that audience above anything else. And so that's all overwhelming, but really exciting to me, because I think there's a lot of really amazing people that are looking at those questions head on and are as equally excited by coming up to those obstacles and figuring out how to face them.
I love it. And I love the fact that you flip the catastrophic to the positive, which is such a Midwestern thing to do. That's what we do. But also I think it's Midwestern, but I think it's an artist. I think it's truly genuinely in your art. Artists, we just make do with what's happened. Like, give me 4 feet of space and I got to dance. Here we go.
In my business, I have no choice but to be optimistic and the hopeful optimist, because the finance, like the economics of theater make very little sense from a financial perspective. We just have to figure things out. And I do truly believe, because I know that the experiences that I have had, and I know there are more people like me that are out there. They may not love it as much as I do, but I know that there is the story for the right person at the right time, that they need to hear it at that moment in their life. And that's going to create a really life-changing experience for an individual.
I love it. And so for those folks out there in the hinterlands, what would be your advice to enter into this world? I mean, you're in it, and you're loving it, and it's not about the success. I think sometimes we overrate success and happiness. You're happy. You're a joyous guy.
Success is different for every individual, and I constantly have that internal demon as well that's looking at other peers of mine at different places in their own career and their own paths. And success is absolutely subjective to each individual. But the thing that keeps me going, no matter how high or low I feel, it is an unabashed and unapologetic enthusiasm and passion for what I do. And so I think that is a huge thing. And that if you have any, whatever that passion in your life might be, you have to trust that if you are passionate enough about it, you will find ways to make it a career. You figure out ways to be resourceful and how to just connect one opportunity into the next. And the other part of that just pure passion is never being afraid to learn and just completely immerse yourself in what you want to do. I'll always say, there's that cliche of dress for the job that you want, not the job that you have. And I very much believe that in theater, which is, or in any of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
Live the life that you want to have, not the one that you are stuck in. There is truth where if you start to really secret that and you really start to put that into the universe, things change, and it won't happen fast, but that those circumstances will start to change, and you will start to look at different things that happen in your life as opportunities for growth and as opportunities for extension. And, that just ties in from one thing into the next to create a really beautiful line of life, career, success, professional and personal.
I love it. I love it. That is the best advice that we could give. That's why the podcast is called Inspired By. I want, and I'm hoping folks are inspired by because it's coming through and how you're talking. I mean, I'm watching the audience doesn't have the benefit of watching you, and you're just animated and he's in it. And it's like, folks, that just gets me going. I'm thinking, okay, I could do this. So it's super
the Italian.
Cool. So,
I talk with my hands.
I'm a dancer, so I'm always doing this. I'm like, oh, it was like all of a sudden I've gone, total BB Miller. So I got a couple questions for you. You are so immersed in this world of the arts. Anything that you've seen recently that just made you go, wow, that was pretty impressive? I mean, I'm just kind of curious because I know what mine is, but I'm kind of curious, like what's kind of sparked your interest? Something that just made you go, wow.
Well, I am biased because I was a co-producer on it, but the recently now closed Broadway production of A Strange Loop, I thought was artistically different and exciting. And I think that it's one of those shows that we won't really know how big of an impact it had for another 15 years. But I do think that we will look back on that moment in Broadway history and see a very clear turning point of the things we talk about in musicals and how we talk about them. And so A Strange Loop, I think, was artistically an outlier and something so unique, so exciting, and so special.
I have a question about Strange Loop because I love the fact that what I know of the show, I was just like, this is mind tripping, genre bursting, like lacking a categorization. Like I was reading and going, I wouldn't know how to describe this, but by God, I want to see it. It kind of reminds, and so there seems to be this trend. And the reason why I said it, because my thing right now is Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's just kind of blown my head open. I'm like, oh, I found my love of cinema again because of that movie. So I'm like, now I'm going to see lots of films in theaters because I really want to have the experience. So
both of those are great examples of, imagine having that idea in your head and having to explain it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like before, now we have, the thing is out there. We have the movie, we have at least the cast album. You've seen the Broadway, like it's out
You've seen clips, yes, right.
But imagine that just being nothing more than an idea and having to describe that to somebody on what is in your head. It's remarkable. It is truly remarkable to think of all of the different, how somebody could linearly come up with that and then sit down and actually put that on paper so that I could then read it, or then a director could take that and put it on film. It's crazy. It's truly crazy.
And I think that there's that trend towards now. Put it in the timeline for me. Like Strange Loop is 22.
Yeah, so Strange Loop opened on Broadway in 22, but that was, the Broadway production was the culmination of 20 years of development. Michael R. Jackson, the writer, had been working on that show since the early 2000s. And
Ah, okay.
that,
That's right. Okay. I'm
yeah,
trying to make
that
the note.
Broadway production was just that moment of realization for it. So it was a piece of work that was very personal to him in a number of ways.
Mhm.
But he had been working with that, which is actually how I came, initially met Michael and initially found the show, was when I worked on a very early reading of it a number of years ago. But yeah, that idea that it was something that he so clearly knew in his head and for 20 years did not stop pursuing it and did not get bored or was never never to the point of just I'm going to just shelve it and talk it and look at something else.
Right, right.
That was
He
something that was so that was so long in the making. So yes, Strange Loop opened on Broadway in 22.
Okay, so
And
there
unfortunately just
definitely
closed
was.
a couple of weeks ago.
It was just a couple weeks ago, which I saw, but I mean, the people who have seen it, because I did talk to some folks in town who see it, they raved. I mean, it was like they were like, it blew my mind, and I was like, and they're still processing it. So that tells me it did what it was supposed to do. So I'm like,
Correct.
yes, yes, yes. Is there any way possible, speaking of film, is there any way possible of turning that into a movie? I mean, I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, unfortunately, we did not do a live capture, as we call it in the business of the Broadway production. But that being said, Michael, I know, has a lot of conversations and is increasingly popular in the world of film and television. And so I would not be surprised if in the next couple of years we hear of a major studio auteur director deciding to figure out how to do a film adaptation of it.
I think that would be awesome. I'm just throwing it out
I
there in the
agree with you,
universe. See, that's the whole thing. I'm like, so it's like, and so I always tell people all the time, and our listeners, it's like you got to be around other artists to kind of spark other ideas and just kind of throw them out there. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I just wanted to ask that question because I knew, and I'm glad you brought up Strange Loop because that's your second time. I mean, you really are like, does it? Do you just kind of ignore the fact that you've got these Tony Awards and really it's just, I love the work? That's the added bonus. I'm kind of curious.
1,000%. I mean, again, none of us you can't do anything in this business out for the desire of awards or anything because there's so many
No.
things that are outside of your control. What's the most important, like any art, is that you believe and are passionate and are proud of what you're putting out there and that what you're putting your name on. And so that's always first and foremost is the belief of that. We have no control over how, awards are so finicky. It's based, do the reviewers and does the nominating committee, is that the story they want to hear that year? You don't have any choice about a Broadway house. When you get offered a theater for a show, you have to take it because otherwise you could be waiting for years and years and years.
Wow.
So you don't know what else you're up against. There's so many things about the awards, but ultimately here, what I will say that I appreciate about what the awards do for me is that they are somewhat of a door opener to a lot of other people that are not in our business regularly, that I can ultimately use it as somewhat of a calling card, and that it does help make introductions, or there is some sort of an assumed legitimacy that it provides for when I'm meeting new people that are not in particularly potential investors or other people, other artists, when I'm trying to say, I want to tell this story with you. It's a good thing that says, I know what I'm talking about. I've got experience doing it, and I have somewhat moderately good taste.
Oh, I think it goes beyond moderately, but that's the Midwest in you. Joey, this has been a great conversation because I did know you before, and I feel like the world has come to know you a little bit more. So thank you for taking time out of your day.
Absolutely. I'm going to actually be in Dayton in May for rehearsals for the Human Race Theater production of
Are you really?
Indigo. That's a new musical that I'm helping with develop with the race.
That is so crazy. Emily Wells just sent me an email saying, "Do you know of any actors who would want to do this role?" Because I know a couple people. I know some people.
We're trying to make it. We're trying to really get a hometown feel for it and everything. So I'll be there. I'm really excited. I was just with Emily here in New York last week, and I'm really excited to be in Dayton for a lot of May as we get the show up.
Oh, I love it. So okay, so you're going to be here in May. can we have a drink?
We can absolutely have a drink. Absolutely.
Okay. And I think Emily would love it too. So we get Emily and Cappy in there and it'll be just a party. I absolutely love it. Small world, folks, the
Perfect.
arts. Small
Had to get a little
world.
bit of a
Perfect.
plug in there for the show too.
I love that plug. That's super awesome. I love it. I just got that email. That's so crazy. I get emails like that all the time. So I'm in that realm of the world, which is fun for me. I just love being a connector. That's all I love. I love my job. I love my life.
That's the same exact feeling over here, Rodney, is that I get no more fulfillment than when I can connect two really awesome people to go do something really awesome together.
That's great. Okay. Well, I'll see you in May, and our listeners will get to hear this experience and maybe do a little, where's Joey Monda in Dayton, Ohio? Sort of like where's Waldo? All the theater groupies, all the kids, the theater kids will be out there going, hey, you signed my book. You don't put it past them. I love it. Thanks, Joy, so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rodney.
Rodney Veal's Inspired By is a production of Public Media Connect, the regional partnership of CET in Cincinnati and Think TV in Dayton. There's a lot of great art happening around Southwest Ohio, and we're excited to be part of it. If you liked this episode, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can learn more and find the show notes at thinktv.org/inspired by or cetconnect.org/inspired by. Thank you.